Hello, I'm Mark Hammett, minister of the Weber Road Church of Christ in Corpus Christi, Texas, and as always, you are welcome to visit with us at Weber Road. We have a beautiful community here, a lot of great people, and we'd love to have you visit with us, and especially if you're from our community, you live anywhere close by, and you have any questions about the church or anything, especially of concern of yours, of a spiritual matter, we'd love to be able to help you and to try to answer your questions. Definitely make it a point to visit with us soon. You may want to turn to Matthew chapter 7. We're having our daily devotional and Bible readings during the weekdays. We've been doing these since March. And I don't know how many we've done. It's somewhere in the vicinity of 130 to 150. And hopefully they've been encouraging to you if you have listened to some before. There's a story about 1174, the year 1174, the Italian architect Bassano began work on what would become his most famous project of all. It was a separately standing bell tower for the cathedral in the city of Pisa. The tower was to be 8 stories high, 185 feet tall. There was one little problem, and you know what it is, I'm sure. The builders quickly discovered that the soil that they were building the building on was much softer than they had anticipated. The foundation was far too shallow to adequately hold up the structure. And sure enough, before long, the whole structure had begun to tilt. And it continued to tilt until finally the architect and the builders realized that nothing could be done to make the Leaning Tower of Pisa straight again. It took 176 years to build that tower, and during that time, many things were done to try to compensate for the tilt. The foundation was shored up, the upper levels were even built at an angle to try to make the top of the tower look straight. Nothing worked. The tower has stood for over 800 years, but it leans about 18 feet away from where it should be. Pretty amazing. In a real sense, the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy is going to fall, just like every building, every man-made structure in this world will eventually fall. But scientists travel yearly to measure the building's slow descent. They actually reported at one point that the 179-foot tower, as it turns out, moves about 1/20th of an inch a year and is now about 17 feet out of what they call plumb. It was estimated that by the year 2000 it was going to fall and collapse. Well, of course, they, in the early 2000s, worked on the building, and so it still stands even today. But there are thousands of tourists that travel to see the great edifice that will, of course, eventually fall. All because it was not built on the right foundation. And foundations make the difference. They become a matter of extreme relevance and importance. And how true that is, even of our life. We must have a solid foundation. And we know what happens when we don't have that solid foundation. There's evidence of that throughout our world today. Young people that grow up in homes with no solid foundation. They have nowhere to go back to lean on, to go back to get their bearings straight. And because of that, they're in the world, and in a sense, they're hopeless. And they need that solid foundation. And we need to provide that as parents. We definitely need to provide that as a church and as Christians in our life. We need to have that solid foundation. Of course, that solid foundation all comes from Jesus Christ, the Son of God. I'd like to read with you from Matthew chapter 7. This is a very short reading. Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 24. This is what Jesus said about the importance of a foundation. He said, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it." Notice again in that passage what the foundation is that Jesus is talking about as he tells that story. Everyone who hears these words of mine, the words of Jesus, are to be a foundation in our life. I would encourage you to continue to study God's Word, and I hope this has been an encouragement and a reminder to you to hold on to the solid foundation of Jesus Christ. If you have not yet obeyed the gospel of Christ, or you know someone who hasn't that might be receptive to that gospel, I would encourage you to yourself obey the gospel by being essentially baptized into Christ if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God and you're willing to turn away from anything, any sin that separates you from God. And I hope that you'll share that with others, because that is important for all of us to have that foundation of Jesus Christ in our life. And may the Lord bless you richly as you seek to follow His will.